Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us, especially those of you in far off time zones. Thanks, much appreciated. Okay, so let's get going. We're going to have a few little presentations, and there's 15 minutes allotted to each, but mine certainly are not going to be that long. Got to update. There we go. Okay, and then we'll have a, oh shoot. Oh no, I'm going to present that from a different, just from over there. Anyway, okay, so I will start with UD units, and there was a discussion a while ago. Right here, I think. Oops. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this was a conversation. This was towards the end of the conversation, I think. Okay, I'm making sure I'm on the right one. Oh yeah, this was at the end, but I think it kind of summarizes things. And maybe I'll increase the font. Wait, how do I do that? In the browser, Control Shift plus, Command Shift. There we go. Okay. There's CF specifies the value of the units attribute as is a string that can be recognized by UD units, but there's various different ways that it's written up in the specification. So as per the recommendations in UD units. Oh, and then formatted as per UD units.dat file. So those are trying to say the same thing, but they're not. And UD units.dat is old. It's UD units 1 and CF is. Anyway, basically, this is just saying we need to update this a little bit and be more specific. Okay, that is my first topic, UD units. That's the only thing that I think was had come up that I would remember is there's things about UD units all over in the CF conventions document, and we need to bring those up to date and make sure they fit together well. Okay, so that's one thing that needs to become an issue or a PR. Can somebody write this down in that document just so that I remember that I should do this, because this one's probably one that I brought up, and so I will create an issue or PR or something. And then my second topic. See, now we got so many of these things. I'm not. This isn't. No. Yes. Hold on. I can't believe anybody wants to disagree with me.
I'm not disagreeing. So for folks online, this is Jim Beard. I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is in relation to UD units, do we want to continue to have any kind of explicit connection to UD units? I mean, we can say valid SI units that must be convertible, you know, when it talks about like canonical standard name units and things like that. And we can say, you know, unit string like this for reference time and all that for time. What value is brought by stating UD units?
I can tell you that the nice thing about UD units is it has a limited scope for how you can label a particular unit. So the thing I fight with all the time is degrees. Degrees C, degrees K, degrees F. They handle all that argument for us, and then we don't have to have the argument.
Right. Go ahead.
I'd say the other part is that there's a defined grammar for how the multiplication of units is done. And so UD units defines a grammar for specifying a unit string. And so that's what it brings us. Now, whether or not it would just be better to refer to that grammar and not the implementation that's in UD units, that might make some sense. But there's more to it than just SI units.
So maybe this should be an issue, and we'll talk about some of these things on there, and then we can go move forward to a PR at some. So yeah, those are good points. Right, and I would say the other nice thing about UD units is it does do conversions and stuff, which are useful when you're actually working with the data, though CF doesn't say anything about that. So, and that's a separate thing. I think it's, yeah, what was just said are the real important pieces that make it useful for CF. Okay, any other?
So sorry, I may have missed the first few minutes due to connection problems, but there might be also some possibility for middle ground here. We could very well use the UD units library and the grammar and all that stuff, but package our own unit system, right? That would just be an XML file. And this way we would have the freedom to address some of the oddities in the standard UD units system, where you have these things like a month is exactly 1/12 of a sidereal year or something, which makes no sense for anyone. Yeah, so there could be some middle ground where we leverage the positive things, but can still address the shortcomings.
Right, and I'm wondering if the next part of this email that's from when? October last year, because this is the next topic on the agenda is, is calendars. So there's an issue there too about, let's see. Okay, so right, so sorry, I'm reading this in my head and not saying anything out loud. So, but let's see, I don't know if this is all of what was discussed. And I mean, there's more, and I think Martin responded to this email, and I'm sure up the chain too, there were some interesting things said. But so if clarifying how CF uses UD units, if so, and given what, yeah, UD units does not handle calendars. So there has to be something around calendars that would, oh, you know what, the next email is from Martin, and I think, what's that? Okay. We might start by, sorry, I reviewed this very briefly before coming up here to talk. So I'm just still trying to remember where clearly stated, so this is Martin saying, clearly stated distinction between unit string and units. Somewhere in there, in here. Anyway, calendar, there's, it's unclear what, I think there was a bunch of trying to interpret what calendar means. Does it only apply to the month since, or does it apply to the time, the reference time in the second since, month since, whatever? And this, I believe, most of this conversation came up when there was, sorry, the original posting was from, can I get to the original posting? Oh, sorry. The original posting, I believe, was from sorry, from Jeff. Okay, and this was about the 360-day calendar and using month since and what that means. Does the calendar apply to month? Does calendar apply to the timestamp? And that, so there were some issues around that. I think that's where some of this came from, and what some of those last comments were about. So there's the UD units thing that I just went over, and then there's this calendar. It's not clear, or it's not clear to everybody who has been interpreting this, how calendar affects that thing, because And this has to do with UD units because a lot of people see, okay, just take this month since string and hand it to UD units and do something with it. And that doesn't work when you're using a 360-day calendar. So the calendar has to apply to all of that information. And so really, I think that's where the UD units is only it only applies to the string value, but if you're going to do anything with it, you have to not use UD units to interpret it. That's just for time and calendars.
Well, the thing is, in the climate community, but I'm sure this applies to a wider community, but in the climate community, for sure, we have a lot of monthly mean data, right? And so how do you store that? The easiest thing is to say, well, why don't I just make a time coordinate that has months since, then I can compare 360-day calendars has 12 months and a leap year calendar and no leap, all 12 months, all easy, right? So let's just write in months since. But then you really stumble because months is interpreted as written here in this email, like the 12th of sidereal year or something, which is this super odd unit. And then when you convert that or compare it with daily data, then suddenly nothing lines up anymore.
Right, exactly. So I think that's where this kind of, at least where at the end, I think we got to the spot where we need to clarify both all the UD units, how UD units applies to things in the spec. That's that first one we talked about. And then also that calendars, and no matter what, really, you have to deal with time outside without UD units.
Yeah, I think we kind of almost zeroed in on saying we really need a kind of separate system that is not interconvertible with the SE time unit system, where the finest resolution is really 1 month.
Right.
And this will serve this kind of application very well and probably necessitates the introduction of a new unit name like calendar month or something like that.
So this has come up recently at the OGC temporal domain working group as well. And they've basically decided to make a statement that calendars are not, I don't know the mathematical term, but calendars are not a continuous axis. And if you have data that exists and you have to use a calendar to resolve the indices in your data, it's not a linearizable axis. It's a discrete axis. And if you want to represent things that unfold over a duration of time, it's on you to map that onto a calendar. And it's not something that can be generalized in the sense of what we're talking about here. So the idea that we would split the two is right in line with the kind of the highest level general thinking about calendars versus time axes. So, and I would direct you to shoot Chris Little if you want the nitty gritty of why that is.
And Mark, I know, has also been involved. So
on Mark, you know Chris, right?
So yeah, I'd just add an extra comment to that, if I may. So it's not just
yeah. Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So the work in OGC has not just taken place in the temporal domain working group. There's also been explicit standards activities looking at coordinate reference systems and the conceptual model for coordinate reference systems and the well-known text coordinate reference system encoding standard. Both now include temporal coordinate reference systems and information on how to use those to store both coordinates that are a linear amount of an SI unit, such as seconds, and an integer quantity, such as a calendar month, which may not be well defined or may be different lengths at different spaces. So if there is activity looking at something that might be able to be adopted in the future, I'd encourage people to look at the coordinate reference system standards that have now been published jointly by OGC and ISO. And the fact that CF already recognizes well-known text coordinate reference systems gives us a whole set of hooks to be able to use that work rather than reinvent the concepts if they fit.
Right, great, thank you. Okay, I think so. That's another issue that needs to be put into GitHub, and this discussion or some of it has to be summarized, and then a proposal or PR at some point needs to be made. I think.
Right, Mark, could you make sure that some pointers to these standards that you just mentioned end up in the issue on GitHub?
Yes, of course. I will try and monitor traffic and find appropriate places. They should all be published and in the public domain by OGC now, so I can send you things directly, but I will also try to add links to the 2 tickets anytime that I see one coming up.
Thank you. Okay, any more comments on either of these topics, UD units or calendars or coordinate reference systems in terms of time? Okay, okay, we'll move on to, and now we're gonna really just screw this whole conversation up, and Jim is gonna talk about the conversation that has been going on for a while around off and on in very voluminous spurts at times, leap seconds and calendary things. All right.
Okay, so I went ahead and put together a little slide deck here to try and summarize some of the things that have gone on in the GitHub that tried to break the whole CF mailing list and everything. So rather than slide down through all of that. So first off, just kind of how we got to now, just a recap in case someone's not familiar. CF time coordinate variable. So they're numeric. There have been various times where people say, well, let's have strings, let's have basically time label things, and that's, that's generally been, the pushback's like, no, that's not the way we do this. We got these, and it's like, okay, but this is the way we are now in any event. So numeric variable, what's in the variable is elapsed time. So there's counts, and I'm gonna say seconds here. It can obviously be days or weeks, shouldn't be months or years, but it can be minutes, hours, et cetera. But ultimately, I'm just gonna say seconds because that gets to the granularity of where you start seeing things show up later on in this. Those values are relative to a reference date and time that's declared in a units attribute on the variable. That's that sense, like seconds sense, date and time, right? The reference time is interpreted according to the value of the calendar attribute. So if it says it's Gregorian, Julian, 365 day, 360 day, et cetera. And it says that the time part in CF, the time part of that date timestamp, that's the reference, is to be interpreted as being in UTC. And of course, kind of like what we were talking about just before this, if you're not in a Gregorian calendar, that really doesn't mean anything. It's just, about all you can take from that is it's year, month, day, hour, minute, second. But if it's in a real world calendar, then it should be interpreted as UTC. And all was well with the world until leap seconds. Like the thing is as we're going along in all this, leap seconds do a lot of weird things that break the paradigm. So what's the problem? If your accuracy or precision is low enough that it doesn't really matter, then it's like you can ignore this whole issue, right? If you're acquiring data like once a day at noon and you're off by 37 seconds, it's like unlikely, for most of your use cases that's going to matter to anybody, right? If you're off by by 1 or 2 seconds, it's like, no big deal. But in situations like for satellites, where you're going at 7 kilometers per second, 1 second starts to matter. 37 seconds matters a lot, for example, right? So, or if you're doing very high speed data acquisition, again, it starts to matter. So getting a little bit into what exactly is going on here. One of the things we found in the discussion was that there's a lot of confusion about exactly what leap seconds even are, okay? So the best way to think about this is they're really equivalent to leap days, just applied at a different level and for a different purpose, okay? So leap days, we add those periodically so that we keep the Gregorian calendar synchronized with the orbital motion of the Earth. So if you think about like the vernal equinox, we want to say, we want to keep it when it says it's March 21st in the calendar, that we're at about the vernal equinox. The Earth is at about that point in its orbit so that we're in the right spot, right? So when you look at what's going on there, if you average it out and everything, the Gregorian calendar there's still a drift going on, and it's 25 seconds a year. Of course, that means that we're good. We'll actually be off a full day in the year 4500 or so. But until then, it's like we're kind of okay, right? It's like as long as you're good within a half a day or whatever, we're doing pretty awesome on staying synchronized with the actual orbital motion of the Earth by adding these leap days periodically, right? Leap seconds, they're added to keep the rotation of the Earth and the time stamp in UTC to say, hey, midnight is actually when the zero meridian is pointed directly away from the sun, kind of a thing, right? And it tries to keep it within 1 second. Okay, so that's what's going on there. But if you notice, this all has to do with the representation as strings, essentially, as labels of like year, month, day, or hour, minute, second. There's no tinkering. If you look at elapsed time since some reference mark, like atomic clock that's just going tick, 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 leap seconds don't get involved at all, right? It's just elapsed time just goes. That's like the count of days, like the Julian date, which is not Julian calendar. That's the thing, people confuse those things too, but it's a count of days since this mark, and it just runs. You don't add leap days to it, it just increments, right? So when you're in those elapsed time things, leap seconds, leap days don't come into the picture. It's the question of how do you then turn those into the representations we like to look at time with, is where these things show up. And this is what their purpose is to keep orbital motion and rotational motion synchronized with the real world, essentially, right? So like it says there at the end, there have been 37 leap seconds added since they started doing this stuff back in 1970. So the atomic clock time, which is called TAI, which does not do leap seconds, and UTC are currently 37 seconds apart. So how does this affect a CF time variable? It does not directly, okay? If you had a perfectly righteous thing, time variable, your elapsed time would be unaffected by this. The only place leap seconds are going to come in is in terms of what's in your reference time. So what's in that sense, date, and time is where it falls in for the most part, and we'll get to the exception. So what's the problem? So first thing is almost no date and time functions on computers that we have any clue about leap seconds. They don't apply them, they don't unapply them, they don't think about them. They do the math as if they don't exist, okay? And that shows up in a number of places. The other thing is we have users, in particular out of the satellite world, that would like to use TAI time, the atomic clock time, that doesn't have leap seconds added to it. Or, for example, unmodified GPS time. You can set a GPS receiver to give you GPS times that do not have leap seconds adjustment. The message is in the GPS message, so you can get UTC times out, but the basis for GPS is also a leap second free time system. And if people say, well, I've got this and I would like to have it in my netCDF file unaltered, then we've got a problem because CF says, no, it shall be a UTC timestamp. So, and then it's good if error, oh yeah. And the thing is again, if error is up to 37 seconds, didn't finish typing, are okay for you, then you don't have to worry about all this stuff again. It's like, all right. So the problems that we see coming out of all this would be, first off, I have a valid UTC time in my, for my date stamp in my reference, for my reference time, and I have true elapsed times in my, in my variable, right? So I've got no problem, right? And the answer is maybe, because the thing is again, your time variable is beautiful, but if someone then takes standard, Linux, Unix, Windows functions to turn your time variable into timestamps, you could be introducing all kinds of errors. And again, if you don't care about something up to 37 seconds or like around a second or two or something like that, depending on the situation, don't worry about it. But if that matters to you, you have a problem. So the next one is, I have a valid TAI timestamp and I want to use it. And like I said before, it's like, you can make a beautiful time variable, except for the fact that CF says you can't use that timestamp. You have to convert it to UTC. And so now you have to go muck around with doing all that to get a UTC timestamp to put in your time variable. And then people are still having a problem. Now, interestingly enough, if someone was to take your TAI timestamp and your beautiful elapsed times and use standard Unix functions to turn that back into timestamps, they will get perfectly valid TAI timestamps out. So they'll be in perfect, as long as they know those are TAI timestamps, they'll be in great shape. But we're violating CF. So then we have the one that is kind of the weirdest in a sense, but I think actually represents a pretty common use case, is you start your input data to your, to go into your netCDF file is a bunch of timestamps. And let's say they're perfectly good UTC timestamps. You've got, network time protocol running on your, computer that's acquiring the data, and you're grabbing those UTC timestamps and you're going into into a spreadsheet or whatever, right? And then you're saying, I'm going to make a netCDF file out of this. And so you just use the standard, software that's available to convert that to elapsed times, do the math. And now I have a time variable. So I'm good, right? And the thing is like, again, maybe, it's like, interestingly enough, if you did the exact same thing with these like non-leap second aware libraries to convert that back to timestamps, you'll get your exact timestamps back that you started with. But your time variable may not be monotonic if there's a leap second in the middle of it and your resolution is tight enough, or it may at minimum not be metrical. In other words, if you try and it's not a linear basis anymore, sort of like was being talked about, I guess Dave was mentioning the thing about, the non-metrical nature of time systems, that when you're working with calendars and this whole thing like months and all this same kind of issue. If you do math, say this, this timestamp, this time elapsed time minus this elapsed time, subtract it, it ought to be 37, it's 37.2 kind of a thing. So you can get into that sort of stuff. And so you can get unexpected results when you're trying to do math with your elapsed times, because they're not proper elapsed times anymore. So again, in that sense, in particular, if it's non-monotonic, this breaks CF. But if someone just naively uses it and doesn't look at the elapsed times, they get the timestamps back that were put in and they round trip beautifully. But again, we're breaking CF. So what was proposed about this was adding some new calendars and modifying the interpretation of the just vanilla Gregorian calendar, okay? And so we've got, oh yeah, and we moved to here because that one was taking up way too much room. So we suggested, let's have a new calendar named essentially UTC, or Gregorian _ UTC. And so you can kind of see from this table what we're talking about. Like in that case, the reference time would be in UTC, right? Would you need leap second aware functions? You might need them in order to process this data, in particular in order to get back your UTC timestamps, your proper UTC timestamps from the data in your time variable. Are your elapsed times monotonic? Yes. Are they metrical? Yes. With TAI, you'd say your timestamp is in TAI. So that the calendar would say, hey, you interpret that timestamp this way, right? In this case, you don't need leap second aware functions, and your elapsed times are, are fully metrical and they're monotonic. GPS similar. This is if you had unmodified GPS timestamps, for your reference. They would work beautifully, don't need leap aware time functions. Then when we were calling it NTP based on like internet network time protocol, for lack of a better description of it, this would be where your reference time is UTC, and you don't need leap aware, functions, but your elapsed times might not be monotonic and they might not be metrical. And then last off for Gregorian would be to say, okay, because of all the history of this, we've got all kinds of stuff out there that has a Gregorian calendar listed on it. And you can't absolutely prove what was done with it, how it was arrived at, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent with relation to all this stuff. And so to say, with Gregorian, we would assume it's UTC, but essentially no guarantees about precision or accuracy, down in this leap second range kind of a thing. So objections to that. There was pushback from a number of directions, but it's kind of the major ones were some felt that CF should only use UTC with metrical elapsed times and require everybody to use leap second aware functions to convert to timestamps. And actually, in order to create the variables in the first place as well, because you can't get there if you started with timestamps without leap second aware functions, which does mean because leap seconds don't come on regular intervals, you have to keep updating tables of leap seconds for your functions to use. So it can be a big lift for data producers and data consumers. Some object to the NTP calendar because it would sanction potentially non-metrical or non-monotonic elapsed times. Then last of all, some object to the loosening of their Gregorian calendar definition to say, well, we're not really entirely sure what is in this, because we don't know how it was done and we didn't have a way to let someone signal something else in the past. And that kind of catches us up to where we are now. As we were ratcheting around about those things, it's like I got to where I was being a bit on the busy side with other projects, and I think we all kind of wore each other down to where we were tired of talking.
I guess I'm a little confused when you say that time has to be in UTC. I didn't know that was a requirement to CF. I thought we were allowed to choose calendars or time zones and be pretty open with how we define our timestamp. Is that not true?
The way the CF convention says is that they say if you haven't specified a time zone offset, it's UTC. Okay, but the thing is UTC implies a lot more things than just like that it's the time at the 0 meridian. Okay, it's not just time at the Greenwich, times, at the Greenwich meridian kind of a thing. It implies this whole set of leap seconds and all this other stuff is implied when you call out UTC. So the timestamp with a time zone offset, it's still UTC, just plus X number of hours or minus X number of hours. So it's still implying the entire time system of UTC.
So we can't do GMT right now?
There is actually no such thing as GMT. There are some amazing, long, very interesting threads on this sort of the general topic of this. Okay, I'm warped. I confess. It's like, but just the sort of thing where it's like anymore, it's like people are, basically, if you go to anyone that does time like professionally kind of a deal, it's like, and mention GMT, they will slap you. It's like, just say, stop saying that. It does not exist. It's like kind of a thing. It used to exist, but it exists no longer, essentially.
Where do they get the leap seconds from GMT? I was under the impression that the leap seconds was synchronizing UTC with what they want us to say is GMT.
No, it's to atomic clock time. Well, in a sense, basically it's the offset between atomic clock time and and again, like what it comes down to is saying because like the 37 seconds, it's like that's the difference between a time that does not add any leap seconds and gets out of sync with the rotational motion of the Earth and UTC. UTC is an attempt to bridge between, basically, you could think of it as sort of, like Earth rotational time, just like Gregorian is an attempt to sync between, orbital motion and the calendar, down to the day. UTC is an attempt to sync between the rotational motion of the Earth and our hours, minutes, seconds, down to the second.
Who's the authority on our current rotation?
That would be, there is a
body.
Yeah, in France. Yeah, that they spend countless hours calculating these things all the time.
Replace the
Well, it's,
Could you
Oh, yeah,
guys pass around the microphone when?
oh, sorry.
Nothing more important, but I would say there is published data how they monitor Earth's rotation and when they think that they need to fire another leap second to correct things.
So they,
I also seem to remember there being an offset between Hold on. Breaking the rules.
I remember there being an offset between TAI and GPS that's like 15 seconds.
right, which is constant.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they pegged GPS at the UT, they started GPS, the reference time for GPS time is UTC at January 1st, midnight in 1980. So it was 10 years after the reference point for TAI.
Out of my own curiosity, what
So-
about the other positioning satellite systems like GLONASS and?
I
whatever
have
the European
no
one
idea.
is?
There's also LORAN, which has its own, which is also leap second independent. And it has a different offset, but yeah. We didn't even go there.
Well, then I would say, whatever you do, it has to work with the previous discussion. Otherwise, it's gonna get super confusing, right? So if you have the ability to make the statement, the calendar attribute defines the offset, then these two things have to basically do the exact same thing. Otherwise, it's just gonna get too confusing.
Yeah, no argument with that. I mean, in some, they do interact on some level for sure.
Dave and Mark, does the OGC, the temporal, whatever the OGC documents, ISO documents, do those deal with these types of calendars or whatever these are called? Dave says yes.
I mean, they tell you what to stay away from.
They tell you what to stay away from and what to be aware of, Dave says.
I don't know all the details.
Doesn't know all the details though. Yeah.
I guess part of the question there is whether the OG, and I don't know the answer, but whether the OGC work actually, I guess the difference is for CF, we're actually specifying a particular way to encode time in a variable. Like we're saying, you're going to do it this way. The OGC stuff may not be as directive. It may be, like Dave was saying, it may be more of a, here abide monsters, don't mess with things this way. Go this other way or something.
All right. Anything comments
from online? I'm happy for someone to say, that's not how I remember it.
Where are you going to go from here then? So that was the sort of state of the long thread.
Yes.
You finished that, the objections summarized. What next?
I'm an advocate for adding, for this proposed solution still myself. It's a question of, whether people, in particular, I think we had started to get close and then we actually got sidetracked for a while on the question of, really in situations where you got kind of sidetracked in the whole question of whether we can actually guarantee SI seconds always, depending on what we're looking at. But I think that's worth just avoiding that. That's running down a whole other rabbit hole in the end. But I mean, I guess the thing to me is, and this is kind of going from I guess, and not to say it in a bad way, but there's like folks that have kind of a purist attitude toward this, that, that CF should be beautiful and should always be true to itself or whatever, and a more pragmatic view of things that says, hey, sometimes, things like the NTP case here are they're out in the wild, they're being done all the time. People aren't always aware that there's maybe an issue there, but again, their use case is such that it never shows up. And so do we tell them, well, you're not being properly CF if you do that? Or do we include that and say, well, let's just, take a more pragmatic approach and say, we know this is something that exists in the wild that's being successfully used. Let's give them a way to signal that that's exactly what I did,
so that people can know and say, I now know how I should interpret this time variable, as opposed to, well, let me guess and hope I can figure it out. But again, that's me.
Yeah, I personally also think it's always better if you know people are going to do something anyway, then at least give them a proper description so that there's no ambiguity to what's being done there.
In that sense, it starts rolling into the same thing about, like, I'd like to be able to do calendar months, instead of doing it and, pretending, and just, but don't use UD units to convert this,
I'm just going to point out that the two other main people involved in this conversation, Jonathan and Martin, are not online anymore, so they can't object to.
That's right.
That's not how I remember it.
My nemesis are not.
What's their alternative? Is there an alternative?
Well, I mean, the
Can't
suggested, let me shrink this a little bit back out. Go away. Oh, the arrow there. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Come here, you. There. I mean, one of the alternatives with people said, no, just UTC only. And, and everybody has to, use time, leap second aware thing, do it right. And that's one proposal, that was one of the alternatives proposed. So.
Yeah. Well, and there's already data that's probably like this, so, or that's already wrong.
Yeah. And again, there's a whole swath of use cases where this stuff doesn't matter. I mean, if you're looking at climate model data, it's all SI seconds, in air quotes, it's model data. It's, they ran a thing where there's no leap, there's no leap seconds in their model data world, so it's not an issue, for example. So there's, and
it's
again,
more like,
if you're doing hourly or daily and you're okay with it being off by a few seconds, it's like, it doesn't matter. To so many people, this doesn't matter. It's only certain edge situations where it becomes important. And then sometimes it becomes very important.
Is there someone online?
Yeah, sorry, it was me. But I mean, basically just supporting what Jim said. But yeah, you say these models don't have, maybe don't have a leap second, and that's right. But that's not just like, okay, it doesn't matter. It's really not there, right? So it's not applicable. You couldn't really express it in a leap second aware calendar. Likewise, what's the correct timestamp for the 30th of February in a 360-day calendar? Right. So sometimes it's not even a question of whether you care about the resolution, but just that a certain time system is not really applicable for the application.
Very true.
Yeah, this is Heather Brown. Jim, thanks for bringing this up. I know it's kind of in the weeds, but I agree with, we shouldn't ignore it and we shouldn't pigeonhole into everyone using UTC only. I agree. The point is, what I understand this group CF is just to be able to document how we're using netCDF and give meaning to those ways of doing it, not to say right or wrong. So what I see is some way of trying to make it clear that someone can say, hey, I included these 37 seconds. That's what we need to do. How we do that, I'm not sure.
Yep. And I didn't go into the gory details, but I mean, a lot of this comes down to, you can avoid this in any situation if your reference time is close enough to your first elapsed time that there's no leap second fell between the two. And if there's no leap second within your elapsed time span, then you can avoid this. You can make a whole set of files that, as long as you adhere to that, you can build that, and you can use the standard, Unix, Linux functions to mess with them, and you'll get the right timestamps back and all this stuff. So there's ways around it as well. But if, for example, you use, January 1st, 1970 as your reference time, or 1900, then you're going to have the full force of all 37, seconds of offset, if you do the times, if you do your timestamp math with something that's not aware of leap seconds, for example. So
That's what should be in the documentation. And that's what should be in the documentation.
yeah, so that's, there's a whole set of things there. One, because we say because we say you must do your time as numeric elapsed, seconds since reference. It implies a bunch of stuff that again, in particular, given the climate model data history provenance of CF, it was just not a thing anybody had to think about. And once you get into satellite observations, it's all of a sudden something you care about very much.
All right. Well, it sounds like this and the clarifying calendars and how UD units, blah, 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 and taking into account the OGC ISO documents should stay in touch and make sure we move forward in agreement of some sort. All right, next steps. And unless anybody has further comments on any of those three topics, we're going to move on to kind of a summary and next steps. And we have, all right, 40 minutes, I guess. Okay. So over lunch, we kind of tried to put together this summary network document. The link is in the agenda, which I just clicked from, so you saw that. It's viewable, and I think you can comment on it for general anybody. Anyway, yeah. Okay. So these were the things we kind of tried to summarize. Governance and decisions or next steps. Governance and process. Daniel will champion the effort to update the governance documents. Dave, was that what you said you would moderate? Okay, it was what, yeah, okay, I can't remove those because I'm not me. Thank you. Okay, so Dave's going to moderate, and then there were volunteers: David Hassel, me, Kevin, Andrew. Was there anybody else that said they wanted to participate?
I've been maintaining a list in the issue. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Me, David, Jonathan, you, Dave, Martin, Andrew, Kevin, and Martin.
Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay. Martin. Oh, that's going to get ugly. I'm going to stop typing on this document. Or if somebody does that, then it goes pretty quick. Okay. I think anyway, you can update that if you want. Was there might have been another name I thought you mentioned that I didn't capture. Okay. Anyway, high level plan forward was unanimously endorsed by the plenary. There were no objections to the motion to, what's that? No, and no duck. No tuck. Wait, no, how do you spell that? I'm confused.
No objections to unanimous consent.
No, oh. No tuck. See, it was because the first word is no, I was like, no. Okay, now I get it.
On that, try and remember this correctly. It's right that it's good that
Oh, hold on. Sorry, online. David started talking and we were just listening to him. And
I was kind of stuttering rather than talking. It's good that we know tuck, if we can turn that into a verb. But I think the ultimate decision lies with the governance panel, you know, after listening to the community and so forth. So it's not like it's a done deal because we in this room have said so. There's still further
right.
processes,
You mean
I
for
think.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
So we need to
just-
summarize basically and what we've decided and make sure we
then
pass that by.
the panel can shut the door and beer and sandwiches and
Yeah, exactly.
really decide what
on
to
the phone.
do.
Yes. So a little bit more discussion to do, but we've all basically agreed here and that we should move forward with blah, 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 whatever. Okay. Was there more around that or no? The GitHub part will be pursued together with the governance doc. I forget what this part is. This is not the CI fixes. It's not the, anyway, it will be pursued in, I think this is like what branch. Yes, we all, PRs come off of the master branch. There'll be tags for versions. We'll make sure that all of that is clear in the governance documents and the, Dave sees that as part of the governance process. Yes, so it'll be in the contributing.md and all that. So there'll be both the documents and those kind of standard GitHub documents that guide us in our, so they're kind of part of the governance documents, I think. Okay. Or they're summaries, sort of summaries, or maybe they're the implementation part of the governance, the GitHub implementation of, anyway, you guys are going to talk about that. Governance and procedures.
Governance procedures, yes.
Governance procedures, right.
We'll govern our procedures in the governance procedures document.
Okay, yes. Okay, so that is GitHub issue there, or some topic there. CI fixes, I mean, this may have somewhat been started already. Dave put in an issue and he's been hacking. So anyway, I will make sure after this meeting to clean up, make sure that everything gets cleaned up and that there's not any other loose ends, and contact Dave and Jeff Painter and yeah, everybody. Sorry, Ryan, I added you to this list just because you're my go-to for CI stuff. So, okay. So I will move forward with that. We don't have or even know if we need a moderator volunteer. This is kind of separate from the conventions document, so it's a different.
Yeah, I think this would be more in the, I don't know, I've made a note actually for the procedural stuff to also add things that are not related to the conventions themselves, but to the maintenance of the repository.
Yes, right.
Because that also requires pulling in commits, but it's not the same as.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yes, good. Yep, so there'll be some connections there. All right. DOI attribute in a data set or some kind of citability reference. Should it be in CF or in ACDD? There's already an ID in ACDD, though it may mean something different slightly than what we've been discussing today. Okay, I'm not sure what that second bullet means. Desirable for tracking data set usage. Anyway. Huh? Kevin says that's what we want. That's why we want a DOI here.
Yes, so we can track the data set a whole lot easier. And all the dependencies can have identifiers as well, so we can see how the whole system.
Right.
used.
So it's kind of a provenance and ish, being able to connect the pieces.
And program managers like to see how their money's being spent
Right.
or the impacts.
Okay. And so that's going to be, do we have a champion, a moderator, that stuff? You're what? Oh, I thought you just volunteered for something.
I'm proposing it.
I know, right?
I'm proposing it. I think it would be nice to have somebody else check if you're doing the right thing. Yeah. Sounds good.
Have we decided on what the definition of a moderator is? Does it have to be somebody on the board or official, or is it qualified person? What's the definition?
And generally could moderate. Sorry. Seems like it would be helpful for the moderator to have, well, I shouldn't say that. It would be helpful for the moderator to have history and the ability to be a leader in the process of building consensus in CF, right? Right. So I wouldn't put any strict rules around it about who it is, but yeah, somebody should be able to put their hand up.
Kevin and Jessica, are you volunteering for this? Okay. Okay, good. They're both on board. Okay.
So who should I assign to the GitHub issue? Because that's what we decided for GitHub moderators. They would be assigned the issue.
Oh, was it the moderators that were assigned? Yeah, right. The authors and the moderators and the volunteers. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Okay. Any other discussions around that? And I'm going to say, are there other things that we've missed on here? And there are, I think, swath. Whoops. There was some actions that you were gonna do the feature type. And was there another one? What did the latitude longitude stuff? So we'll go back to external variables in a second.
There's an issue about latitude. That's issue number 133.
123.
133. That it's been there for a year now. Essentially, try to push that one over. And I talked with David about the external variables, and
okay.
I also can be helped there. I don't know that Robert Wolf volunteered to be the moderator. I think it's he did.
Well, there were two.
He wanted to maybe write up something or start the issue or something, but I didn't get a sense that he would be a moderator because
that's what he said was volunteer to
be
moderate, but
moderator?
was it for the extensions to external variables or the file? Or did you guys decide there was a split between those two things?
Yes, there was two. Yeah, he definitely would like some indicator where to find those external variables. But then David and I kind of thought that that's a separate
variables. Whoops. Extend external variables to include other types of variables. Okay, and then include mechanism for indicating where the external files are.
well, some indication, you know, that's why this is kind of it's a complicated, some additional context, maybe providing additional context for finding or exit. Yeah.
What's that?
Verifying the file, not necessarily finding.
Verifying the file, not finding the file.
What would that be verifying?
Excuse me, Ethan, this is Mark on the phone.
Yes.
Could you please put my name down alongside the external variables as well? My organization has a particular interest in this, and I might be able to contribute some detailed inputs. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Yeah, put me, because I also have.
Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so is that enough on external variables? Okay, guys, we got to talk more because we still have 25 minutes. Okay, hold on, microphone. Is it on one of these or a new?
I was going to say, could we pop up the issue list and get moderators assigned?
Oh.
I've been hacking at the GitHub repository, cleaning things. I just kind of took it on myself to do it. Everybody's like, yes. Anyways, there's a bunch of issues that are still relevant and need moderators. I assigned myself to the one that I'm aware of, and I've done a bunch of like closing to say that things are.
Oh, I can't do anything up here.
No, maybe we come back to this, but and really, like, if you're a moderator, you should go assign yourself or get somebody to do it.
Who said something?
You don't need to sign into GitHub. So if someone on that CF project can sign in.
Yeah. I'm going to let somebody else do it rather than sign in on this computer and have to get my phone out for. Yeah. Okay, automatic deployment isn't working. I think did I say I would?
I just opened that.
Yeah.
I just changed it to Doppler shift because you assigned him.
To.
So this one I just opened. For whatever reason, the tokens automatically deploy the HTML after it gets built out of Travis are not working correctly or something. And somebody that knows what they're doing with that could probably fix it in 20 minutes. So, and then you assigned Ryan, right? Yeah.
Did I? Okay.
You said because Ryan helps you with that kind of stuff.
Wait, so.
Oh, I'd assigned Hattersley but I didn't realize that he's not involved.
He's not. He's still somewhat, but not super.
But he was the
active,
one that
is what he
originally
said.
set up the tokens.
Yeah. Right.
Before,
oh, okay.
So.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Okay.
Should move on to the next issue because this one just needs to get fixed.
Is there a way to just jump to the next issue from the list, or you have to go back?
You got to go back.
What kind of user interface is this? Crap. Updating definition of coordinate variable. Oh.
I don't see an obvious moderator for this one.
Yeah, maybe we should stick with the ones that we just talked about today. Oops.
So,
I noticed that issue there, 174, it is very new, but there's a template now which should prompt automatically for you when you open a new issue, which has a field, you put the moderator's name in and.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that template.
No, the template still exists if you go.
So if you click on new issue.
It just doesn't assign it doesn't give an assignee. It's just the tags that the templates do.
Right, no, he's talking about a more in-depth template that.
Oh, I see.
We set up a more in-depth template?
I did. I don't know what happened to it.
Well, there were,
Look back at that.
no, I think if you go, if somebody who is actually logged in goes to new issue, you know, I was gonna do this at my computer earlier, so maybe I'll go back to that, because then,
Oh, you know
display.
what? It's only in, yeah, we can fix that. That's, I'll open an issue and take care of it.
There's an issue, it's being taken care of. I missed that. That's what I heard.
No, well, so recently, and this is important for everybody to kind of be aware of if you didn't see the traffic on GitHub. Recently, we decided to make it so using tags is essentially required, because if you open a new issue, there's an issue type for each tag. And I screwed up, and I guess nobody caught that the tag is a template, right? And there's one template in here for one of the tags that has the template you're talking about. So I'll move that template into the other tag templates, and then that'll be fixed. So
who was involved in, I'm not sure I agree with this statement that netCDF-4 can have coordinate variables that are strings. Maybe it,
You can construct, if you have a netCDF dimension and the 1D variable, if you have a netCDF dimension and 1D variable of the same name, it just happens, the variable happens to be string.
yes, right, so with netCDF-4 with strings, because, okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, I think this conversation just confused me because, and maybe I should look at it some more. Anyway, okay. But we didn't talk about that today, and let's not. So Dave, what was why did we want to go here? Just to, I guess I'm going to leave this page, and you guys should just assign people as we go through this and make sure that happens. So, because I can't actually do anything here, and so if somebody wants to, especially if somebody has write permissions on the repo, I think you might need to have that to add an assignee.
Kind of on the top. Sorry.
Go on.
On the topic of assignees and issues and templates, there is also the possibility to add an assignee to the template, right? So we could make it so that every new feature request first gets assigned to Dave or whatever, and every new bug report gets assigned to someone else. And the responsibility of those people would be simply to find another person to be responsible for that. But like that, we would guarantee that every new report, every new issue would have somebody take care of it.
Yes, that seems like it would be an option. I'm not, David's looking a little.
No, it's very sort of similar comments. Is assigning issues is a sort of common thing we do with our code repositories and stuff.
Yeah.
But we have to, if we're going to use that and for it to mean something,
right?
That's a discussion. Is it the moderator? Is it the this? Is it
or the first person is somebody who has to find a moderator.
Yeah, so it'd be it's fine. We could indeed use that functionality, but it needs to be well defined.
Right. I think that we need to decide on that in the governance and.
I guess that should be part of the discussion about the GitHub integration and stuff.
Right. But that's a good idea, I think. Okay, so we already went through external variables, UD units, and calendars. So there were like 3 things here. One issue to clean up the language around UD units. So I will initiate that, and then we'll need to find a moderator at some point. Okay, and then the second one was the calendars and how 360 day, using months as a unit or a unit in the time unit string, and how the calendar specified in CF affects all that, was the issue, and or the thing that we were discussing. And Mark mentioned the OGC, ISO docs, and the whole coordinate reference systems for time. So do I really want us to claim this? Should I? Anybody else want to do it? Anyway, I'll create an issue. And then, and we can go from there. Okay. And then, do we want to include, Jim, do we want to include anything here? Just summarizing the leap seconds. Is it already an issue? It's already an issue. And so, yep, existing issue on leap second, UTC TAI, blah de blah. How do I? Okay. Moderator. Oops. I tricked you into thinking I was done typing. Moderator. Volunteers. Martin. I'm not sure these are really volunteers. These are people that have been involved. Oh, and this should. Sorry. Oops. I don't know what that means. Okay. Okay.
Calendar issue also. This isn't the calendar issue.
This one's not, but this one is calendars.
So there's clarification of time query requirements. There's issue number 166, clarification of time coordinate requirements, that I think is not this, but slightly related. It also doesn't have a moderator.
Issue
166.
Okay.
Somebody needs to become the timekeeper of and moderate this. I feel like the set of issues around time and calendars and all that is kind of similarly all wrapped up and related, like the governance stuff. So maybe.
Right. So we need a meta moderator to manage the set of issues.
Potentially. I don't know. It just seems like it's a bigger issue that's kind of wrapped. There's a lot of different things that are all halfway related. So.
Or maybe they just all need to reference each other. Okay. What's that? Swath. Okay, so.
133 is not really tied to the SWOT proposal. It's just like something that's additional concern or pain point in the seven SWOT data view.
So do we need to capture any moderators or anything? No, you haven't created, okay, so,
Create.
oops. Right. And so who is dealing with issue 133? And do we need, should we assign somebody? Ah.
133 is a pull request.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's fully requested with it.
Do we need a moderator?
I think it would be good if somebody were to step in and summarize the discussion. At 10 people involved.
Mark started it. Mark, would you be able to provide a top level summary and kind of what the motion is, if there is one, for pull request 133? If you're still with us, Mark.
Yeah, I'm happy to go and comment on it. It's a fairly self-contained pull request. It's only got a couple of changes in, but yeah, I'll try and put them together as a motion. Based on what was talked about earlier, it sounds like we want a moderator in order to make sure it actually gets over the line.
I think this one, since this one was opened as a pull request and it's basically done, we should just summarize it, make sure we all agree and merge it.
What?
Right.
This is sort of a wider point. So there's no issue for this. Well, I think that's a problem. The whole history, you've got discussions in different places now, and I know the early days and stuff. I'm just saying that we shouldn't do this in general. Start with a pull request. That's my opinion. But this is here now, so I'm not suggesting we get rid of it.
But when that's merged, the pull request will still exist, so the discussion will still be captured.
But it won't be in the same place as all the other discussions, and yeah.
So we create an issue and point to this PR and say, here's the discussion, and then is that enough, or?
Do it for me, just because while we're finding our feet on all this process.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in general, we should be fixing issues with pull requests. And that provides you the traceability to both the problem you're trying to solve and the solution to it. And that's the Git flow kind of pattern. So I don't know if that was.
So I also think if you think that no discussion is going to happen on the pull request and that it's just going to go in as is and no discussion on it, I think that's kind of dream world. So you're going to have discussion in two places, regardless of what procedure we go with here.
Yeah. So make sure that's in the governance docs. Right, and I mean, it's hard to insist on one route because some people will start with creating a pull request where they start thinking about what they want the language to look like, and then other people will want to discuss before, because they're not sure, discuss before they start doing anything. So I'm unclear whether we should differentiate. I mean, clearly you have to differentiate between issues and pull requests in terms of how they fit into GitHub, but in terms of our process, it doesn't seem like we should, whether it starts in one place or the other. Anyway, okay. Passing of the baton, hold on, okay, here we go.
So like the numbers that it assigns are Like
commingled.
they're not specific to issues or pull requests. So 133 is always going to be this.
Right. What's that?
And they're sequential.
And there's a what?
They're sequential. They keep going up.
Right. They keep going up. If somebody makes a, yeah, if the next one is a PR, if somebody submits a PR, then that gets the next number. If somebody submits an issue, then that gets the next number, right? Okay. So did we capture that here? Do we need, can we just say, need a moderator?
Yeah. If Mark is going to summarize it, I'll be the moderator.
Okay. Is somebody capturing that in there? I'm going to stop typing in this because it's just confusing me. Or I'll start typing. What the heck? Whoops. I don't know what that is. Oh. Okay. Any other things that we missed? Any other comments for things on here? I guess we don't have it. So Alexander, you're gonna, once the feature type thing goes through, you'll push forward the swath. Right. Right. Okay. So, okay. Any other comments on any of these? What else did we talk about? I guess we talked about a lot of things, but these were kind of the ones where we had actions going forward. So the next steps. Were there any other kind of summary things that we talked about that we should capture that aren't actions? These are all kind of action things. Kevin?
There was a discussion about versioning and going down to the micro and whether you do date or number or whatever. I felt like the general consensus was that major, minor, micro was the preferred way. We just need to figure out the details of how to implement. Does that summarize?
Use semantic.
Although I think you're right, though. You said that major is when you put something in that breaks it. And we're actually going to break it right now with 1.8, right?
There's no guarantee.
Right, yeah.
So you can go in a major without breaking, but there is no guarantee.
No guarantee. So it seems to me the groups falls into that category. So we're already breaking the rules with 1.8. Fair enough. Good loophole. Nice.
So, and we also said that this was something that should be in the governance in the government stocks. Yeah. Is or should be. Okay.
So your point was that standards needs, or not standards, uncertainties needs to be in here. So I'll create a issue. I don't think it's ready for a pull request. Well, I think it's ready for a pull request.
What is?
Uncertainty.
Oh, uncertainty.
So I'll have to create. So what's the consensus in the room? Do you want a issue or do you want a pull request? You want issue. All right.
So we've talked about it at multiple meetings, so.
We will illustrate this in the governance documents, but it seems total, and this is how it's already been, this is how Daniel's already played the governance work. Open a pull request if you have content to share, right? But open an issue at the same time, right? That is the goal. The goal is to fix the issue with the pull request. You can discuss changes to the text in the pull request. You can discuss kind of conceptual purpose and all that in the issue, just to keep the two tidy. And that, yeah.
And how do, so we're also going to have a discuss the email list, the email list replacement, discuss CF conventions / discuss repo with issues. So the issues replacing the current email list. That is kind of what has been decided. We can link to those issues too. And that's where some of these things come up sometimes in those places. Or maybe things if, I'm just wondering when to create issues there about conventions and possible convention changes and when to.
Speaking of conventions, we also discussed tying explicit use of the conventions attribute to tools to make sure they check that for breaking. For features, we were talking about tools currently don't check the conventions attribute. We should have them do that so that they know if the feature added is going to break the tool, and then they can give a warning.
Sorry, we should just get up.
Let's just all stand up and walk around. Then
right, while you're typing. But specific to the GitHub practices, there is a place for a discuss issues list, which is where questions, ideas, all the stuff that people want to ask about and discuss related to CF happens and gets logged so GitHub can see it and archive it and all that. But as soon as it's a proposal or a defect in the spec, it would be in the CF conformance repository or the CF convention repository and be subject to be closed by a pull request.
Right. Yes. Okay. That sounds reasonable. Just.
You're talking about discuss. So CF
Discuss.
conventions / discuss, right?
Yes. That is the replacement for the current email list.
Okay. So then
at some point will be the replacement.
So I made the first comment in there. My first comment was, can we have a separate place for standard names? Split it out. One for proposing discussion and one for proposing discussion or addition of standard names. They are different to me, in my mind.
Yeah. Of course, the problem is things cross over these boundaries.
Then link them.
Yeah, but people don't always know what. Yeah. Well.
I'm trying to reduce my email.
You're trying to what?
Reduce my email.
Yeah. Well, all right. You mean so you don't have to get anything about standard names?
Exactly. Well, no. I don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion about every standard name. Outside of setting up some funky filters in my email, I have no way to filter out 90% of what I don't care about. But if I had the ability to unsubscribe to some sort of commenting, then I could focus in on and actually care about the ones I care about.
Right. Yeah. But can you just decide to not care about a discussion in this? I mean, why do you need a separate repo? You can just unsubscribe to a particular track just conversation about particular names. I mean, that way you have to see the first one of each, but you could, whereas if it's a separate repo, you could just ignore the whole repo.
I assume there are people out there that would care about standard names, but do not care about changes to the conventions. And this is a way for them to hone in on what, and look at the discussion of what they care about without seeing the bigger discussion.
Well, so there was on the email list, there was a conversation. On the email list, there was a conversation about replacing the email lists, and I think that's a good place for that conversation, to have it all in that spot. Though evidently a lot of people didn't see it, so maybe it's not a good spot for. So maybe that's a place to suggest that again, or at least point to this issue. I don't know.
I mean, one thing that definitely probably should happen is that standard name requests get their own label. Maybe it would be worthwhile to have a template for that as well. So when you click on new issue, you choose, I want to get a new standard name, and then
yeah, that's a good, definitely. So that would be on this repo, the discuss repo. We should definitely have a question one and a standard names one and a few others, I'm sure. So, okay.
And then we were also trying to figure out a way to get people to hear in a more simple way than forcing them to have a GitHub account. So we didn't know if we could do it or not, but that was a question.
What did we need? Something about everyone having a GitHub account?
Yeah, so only the question was, do you have to have a GitHub account to partake? Or is there a workaround where somebody could?
I think at the moment, the email list will not go away immediately, and the discuss things will be forwarded onto that list. So most of us will probably unsubscribe to that list, but for those who desperately do not want to touch GitHub or have another user ID thingy for GitHub, will just listen to that. But we want that to go away, because that's one of the reasons we're switching to this, is because the group running that mail list shouldn't be running the mail list anymore. So we could just move, maybe we should just move them to a Google group and send all these to the Google group. All right. So everyone needs a GitHub account. You were just asking if there was a workaround, or was there something else? Should we be thinking about encouraging people? I thought I heard you say encourage.
No, I think the discussion was, is there a workaround to not force someone to get a GitHub account?
Right. I think until the only thing is if they stay on the email list, and that's going to go away sometime. So I'm not sure there's any other workaround.
You can see, but you can't add.
You can just go there.
Well, the question was, can I propose a standard name without? Yeah.
No. Right. Yeah. Email somebody that you know that is on the GitHub list and has a GitHub account, and they can submit it for you. All right. Well, wow. Okay. It's 3:08. We are 8 minutes past time, and our break is going. And as we noticed from last time, the coffee is going to be gone soon. So we better run down there. Okay. I think that wraps everything up. Well, I mean, as far as we're going to get today. Thanks everyone online. We will maybe clean up this summary and get it on somewhere at some point, so we can all remember what we talked about and make anybody who hasn't done what they said they were going to do feel guilty so that they will eventually do it. Okay, well, that wraps it up for the CF workshop for 2019. Wow, all right, thank you everyone.